This is Hemant.
And Jessica.
And you're listening to the Friendly Atheist Podcast. Please go to patreon.com/Friendly Atheist Podcast to support the show and get your bonus episodes and ad-free episodes for $5 a month. And listen, as the person who gets all the emails to the show, I'll just quickly
acknowledge. I have access to them. I opt out.
Yeah. I didn't respond to people because there were a lot of you from last week. I read your complaints. I read your concerns about both of us.
Yeah.
I know you don't like when mommy and daddy fight. Listen, that's the nature of the show. I go in with things I want to talk about. I don't tell Jess in advance. And that means conversations go in every which way, things I didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
And so whatever, it happens. They're not all winners, people.
Truly my favorite part about reading and I was more on the Facebook group and Twitter and things like that. It was more about whomever a person agreed with, they thought the other person was completely out of pocket. Like, if somebody was like, yeah, it's all about workers' rights, and Jess, was explaining this to Hemant, and he just refused to listen. He was being, and it's like, whatever, maybe you were being an asshole, but you're kind of an asshole sometimes.
Yes.
But truly, like, no matter if they agreed with Hemant and like, Jessica has no idea what she's talking about. It genuinely was 50-50 down the middle of people thinking you were an idiot or I was an idiot.
I did read the messages. I didn't respond this time around because I don't know what to say at this point. Anyway, just want to let you know I did get your messages and I did see them all.
Somebody reached out from, I was in are you ready for the whitest thing ever? A white affinity group that I was in 2020.
No comment.
It was just a bunch of white people reading, like, so you want to talk about race and trying to, like, get our shit in order. And this one woman was part of it. And she apparently started listening to my podcast as a result. So, hey there, who's a mail carrier, and emailed me about it, and she said that it is, like you said, like we both said, a lot more complicated than it seems, and all that. So I'm going to follow up with her and maybe do more.
And I'm not going to follow up with any of you who emailed. I'm just saying I did read them, and I appreciate it.
He does read them.
Okay, I'm going to start off with, I figured, let's just get the contentious one out of the way now. Okay. Because this is the story that I think was the most disturbing for a lot of people this week, so all your trigger warnings for this. There's a story out of Kenya where at least 90 bodies, and the count keeps going up, have been found in like shallow graves, and it appears that they were all members, or at least many of them were members, of a Christian cult that told members that they would meet Jesus, but only if they starved themselves to death.
Well, that's a terrible way to die.
Horrible way. And just, first of all, there is a list, also growing list of people who have been rescued. Last I checked, it was like 34 and counting. Someone who works for Kenya's Red Cross told CNN that 259 people have been reported missing by their families, including about half of them, 130 being children. We don't know if they are part of that group in particular or just people went missing for other reasons.
How many were children?
130 were missing, but 90 bodies were found in this
But how many children did
grave.
you say?
I don't know how many children are in the graves. But it seems that they were all members of the Good News International Church, which is led by a guy named Paul Mackenzie. He has a last name that doesn't get used in a lot of the press reports, so I'll call him Paul Mackenzie. But basically, police began looking into the graves after receiving a tip that, hey, you should go check out the jungle where these people meet because there are bodies underneath, which is a fairly straightforward tip. Mackenzie was arrested on April 14th. He shouted "Praise Jesus" as he was escorted away. And just to give you,
praise Jesus that he got saved, or praise
that
Jesus
everyone is saved,
large.
I think, and seeing Jesus because they did what he said. Maybe. Okay. This guy has a history of doing horrible things. He began this church in 2003, but from the beginning, he's been like the source of controversy in a lot of ways. He's encouraged members to dissociate from the rest of the world. He's told members, here's the list, he's told members to quit school, leave their jobs, stop eating worldly food, however you want to describe that, refuse medical treatment, and destroy their government documents like IDs and birth certificates.
Ooh, do you think they encourage them to destroy those things themselves, or give them to me and I will destroy them, and definitely not sell them on the backyard, the black market?
Yeah, I don't know. They were also told not to speak with people outside the cult if they had any intention of getting to heaven.
Which part is the good news?
I don't know yet. We haven't gotten there yet. But this guy, Mackenzie, like I said, it's not just controversial ideas and beliefs and statements. He's been arrested before. Like just last month, he was arraigned in court after allegedly telling parents to starve and suffocate 2 of their children.
Oh, starve and suffocate? In that order?
Separately, yes. And then he was released on a bond that amounts to $74 in US dollars.
Sure. And is this gentleman, is he African? What country is this?
They're Kenyan.
Kenyan?
Yep.
He's Kenyan. So he's not like...
all Kenyan. He's not like a white Christian missionary who's just there to be a thing.
Which is a whole fucking other can of worms.
He was also arrested in 2019 on separate charges involving the deaths of other children. But at that point, he also paid the bond and was set free. Both of those cases are ongoing.
Sure.
He was arrested before that for like anti-education preaching, but that didn't go anywhere. I don't know what that's about.
They have an anti-education law? Can we get that?
Man, it's happening. It's in Florida. One of the representatives, like a government representative, said this to a local journalist, and it was scary. This is the quotation. "The month of March was set aside for all the children to die. The month of April was set aside for the women to die. May was for the men to die." That's according to a government official who spoke to a surviving cult member and was reporting back to like the public saying, this is what these people were up to.
Whoa. And so this is kind of a Heaven's Gate situation that they were planning that, because Heaven's Gate, they did it over a series of days and weeks. It wasn't like they all did it at the same time. So that's so chilling to me of like, yep, they watched their fellow cult members die of cyanide poisoning, I think.
Yeah.
And they're like, cool.
In like Jell-O or something.
Yeah,
Heaven's
I think that's
Gate.
exactly what it is.
They gave them food to die. These people did not.
But truly, like, to me, it's so much more chilling that people witness what is happening. It's not like Jonestown that sort of everything happens all at once and you get caught up.
Right.
This is, these people died. We all fucked around with that, went to sleep, got up the next day, still
and
corpses in our house. And we're like, great, let's do more of that.
And that's the scary thing, that this is not one mass grave of everybody all at once. This is, over time. And I don't know how long it's been going on because I don't know how much I trust the one surviving cult member with no name. By the way, Mackenzie says, this ain't my fault. I shut down the church in 2019, which doesn't make me feel better because, like, you could still run a cult and, like, legally shut it down years ago. That doesn't mean much.
Yeah, people run shit from prisons. Like, this is nothing.
Here's another scary thing. There are unverified reports that some members of the group attempted to escape, like when the starvation stuff was happening, only to be killed. How do we know that? How are we speculating on that? Because at least one body recovered from the grave site appeared to be otherwise healthy and not emaciated. So, like, why was that person buried if they seem fine? And I assume they found...
So it's not like they found people with bullet holes?
I don't know.
Okay.
Again, this is
Sounds like
what's
we're not
scary
getting the
because we're not getting a ton of useful information yet. You hear little bits and pieces from very different places. They all do seem to agree that, like, in general, the horrible tragedy here did happen. It's the details they all kind of have little differences on.
Do you have a sense, and I don't want to brag, I don't know a lot about Kenyan geography. Do you know how... Are they really far removed, like off in the middle of nowhere?
No, I mean,
Jonestown,
if you think about the
of
Horn of Africa, where Somalia is, Ethiopia, Kenya's right below that, on like south of Ethiopia and Somalia. It's not in the middle of nowhere. Now, the jungle these people were in
That's what I'm
was a
asking.
little removed from a distance. It's not like they were in the middle of a big city, but it's not like the place in general was lost to the world.
Right.
I will say the president of Kenya, he did say, like, this guy, Mackenzie, he belongs in prison, and what is being witnessed is akin to terrorism. He also said this guy pretends and postures as a pastor when, in fact, he is a terrible criminal. I would just
I love
add,
this guy. Wait, I
Oh,
should. I
no,
don't know
you will
anything
not.
about the Kenyan president.
Yes, and there,
Shit.
and neither do I. But I'm guessing no, there's other issues. But the truth is, this idea that like he pretends to be a pastor, but he's a criminal, buddy. You can be both.
Sure.
Here's
It's
where
a
I
little
think.
no true Scotsman-y, is that what
Tell
you're...
me, yeah. Tell me if I have this wrong though, because this is where my takeaway was.
Okay.
Obviously, Kenyan tragedy, horrible, horrific, and I think part of me thinks a lot of people just kind of may have seen the headline and thought, well, it happened over there. They have a lot of cults over there. They have a lot of crazy religious leaders who will like pull people in the worst possible
describing
direction.
racist people?
Yes.
Okay.
Or ignorant people who don't even mean to be racist about it. Just like it's something in Africa. I've heard a lot of stories
Sure.
about cults doing crazy things in other countries. And my argument to this hypothetical person I'm strawmanning out of thin air
Sure.
is that I don't think it's that far removed from stuff we see in the US, because if you go back to that list of what this guy allegedly told his cult, quit school, leave your jobs, refuse medical treatment. That's
Christian
stuff we
Science.
see.
That's
We
Scientology.
see that all the time. Yeah.
That's...
There are plenty of Christians, not even fringe
Yeah.
groups, Christian leaders who say you should use prayer as a substitute for medical intervention. Yes, Christian scientists. Yes, all those groups who
snake
use
bite
faith
gentleman?
healing. The crazy people in Kentucky who do the snake thing.
And if they get bit, they don't seek medical help.
Just pray harder.
It's all the same.
And by the way, children in those groups have paid the price for it with their lives. There are Christians who justify child abuse as an extension of biblical wisdom,
Truly?
like training up the child. There are, during the pandemic, there were Christian, there were Orthodox Jewish leaders who ignored safety precautions, crammed themselves indoors, no masks, no social distancing. They said, we demand our church stay open. Plenty of evangelical leaders are downplaying the importance of the vaccine, which are life-saving. So my argument is, well, if you think that a religious leader's leading gullible followers to their deaths by saying something that violates any common sense, guess what? It happens here all the time, too, in different ways. No, there are not starvation cults in the U.S., but the idea of just trust me, just trust God, and then just do what I say. Sure, ignore the pandemic. That doesn't exist in the world. That's some liberal conspiracy or something. That happens here. Christians have died because they listened to pastors lead them down a path of destruction.
Sure.
And that's, again, it's a faith-based thing. And you could even argue it's not a cult leader, like, who knows better, who's walking all these people to their deaths. Like, no, a lot of those people sincerely believe they're doing the right thing, but it's the same end result. Just because you don't see them, just because the bodies are not buried like 2 feet underground to the point where people can find them, doesn't mean we're not seeing the same thing here. So, I mean, we should all be outraged by the slow drip, faith-based deaths that occur in the U.S. just as much as you're horrified by the headlines coming out of Kenya. And I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but that's what came to my mind.
I mean, I think so. I think anecdotally, there are people who have cited either religion writ large or Fox News or white supremacy or whatever. They sort of saddled that concept with the death of their loved one because they got so swept up in this weird conspiratorial mindset that they stopped trusting doctors, stopped trusting like whatever, and made bad decisions. So yeah, it feels all of a piece. It's so fucking sinister though to think of how long, because it takes at least 3 weeks just for someone to starve to death, more or less. Hopefully they're drinking water.
I doubt it. I don't know how much, if anything, was going in their bodies.
That's really scary.
And I say this as a former Jain, which is a religion known for being peaceful, which also encourages fasting, not like this, like not forever, not all the time, but like I have seen stories, anomalies, but stories of Jains who or they encourage children to fast, and it's not healthy. So I'm just saying, like, this stuff does happen in your backyard as much as it's happening over there. It's not limited to one religion. It's not limited to a cult.
Yeah.
It did bring to mind, it's a joke, but it's not really a joke. Like, what's the difference between their cult and, like, someone else's religion?
Population.
The difference between a cult and a religion is that there's always someone at the top who knows it's a scam, but in a religion, that person is dead.
That's good.
And I don't know if this cult leader who
love
got
that.
arrested, like after he got arrested, he started going on a hunger strike too, saying like, well, I'm going to be with all these people as well.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if I believe that you know what
Right.
like you don't know what you're doing here.
Golly, I just listened to a podcast about the tragedy of the Essex. Do you know that
No.
story? It's basically what Moby Dick was based on. It was a whaler ship that got sunk by a sperm whale / possibly white sperm whale. And they all ended up on this boat for, I think, 2 months or something like that. And a few of them survived. And let me tell you, describing what it's like to die from dehydration sounds fucking miserable. Like, not to
believe
like
it.
say the most obvious thing ever, but like your tongue swells up in your mouth to the point you can't speak.
Yeesh.
Like, that is just one thing that has stuck in my brain from the 3 months or whatever that I listened to that episode of last podcast on the left. And all I can think is, oh, some little Kenyan 12-year-olds, that's how they died.
Yeah.
Because why?
Because their parents or this cult leader led them down that path and told them this is the best decision you could be making. Yeah, you will suffer and you're going to like it.
The other day, I forgot my water bottle when I was going to Target, which is across the street, and I panicked. I immediately was like, oh my God, I'm so thirsty.
You
I'm
would
going
not
to die of
survive in this
dehydration.
cult.
I wouldn't
This cult is
survive
not
for
for
a
you.
I have 3 water bottles with me at all time. I am very hydrated. I would not thrive in this
That is
environment.
somehow the whitest thing you have said.
I'm fine with that.
said.
My skin looks great.
Thank you. Yes. This
This is
idea
how
of
you know he doesn't listen when I talk.
nope. The using God as leverage to convince your followers to make terrible decisions, that is not unique to this group. Is
What a sad story, though.
horrible story.
The kids are always hard to
Yeah, no kidding. I don't know how many children were victims of
watch
this.
your child. Like, I watched my niece and nephew over the weekend, and Maeve cried for like 5 minutes, and I was like, I am brokenhearted. How am I going to help this person? And somebody
Don't worry. When you become a parent, you become immune to all of that, and none of it phases
will
you
not
ever.
become a parent. Cannot. My heart is made of stone now. No, it's true. It's just like it just so is antithetical to human nature to allow your children to slowly starve to death. It's very
Seriously.
fucked up and says a lot about the pull that religions and cults have on people. That
No kidding.
they're willing to let their child die in front of them.
Yeah.
Fuck, man.
All right. Happier story because it involves stealing the Bible.
Happier than African children dying in a shallow grave. Why?
Yeah, the bar was low for happy stories here.
Lower
This
than
is a
those
story that
graves.
should not be a controversy, but like Republicans are really itching to make this a controversy. Here's
Oh,
the story. Republicans in Arizona in their state house, Republicans in Arizona, by the way, in the legislature, they have a small majority in the Senate, they have a small majority in the House, and then they act like they're all kings. They're all mad at one Democratic lawmaker because in the state house, they have like a members only lounge.
Do you have to wear the jacket?
Yeah, I don't know what color it is, but yeah,
like
it's
the
like
Delta Lounge.
pretty much. And you go there to relax and get away from the media, I assume, or you need a break during votes or whatever. I don't know what they do
shit
in
about
there.
the other
I
senators.
don't care about the lounge. The lounge is there. It turns out there are Bibles strewn about in the lounge. And a Democratic lawmaker, her name is Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, basically sees them in there all the time, and she started just moving them off like the couch and like off the table in the middle and putting them somewhere, or like under the cushion, or here, I'll put this one in the fridge. And at some
Low-key
point,
gaslighting their coworkers.
and like, because she's arguing, they don't belong here.
course
What
they
are we doing?
don't.
And then the Republicans are like, someone's taking our Bibles. Let's install a hidden camera. And they did. And they see her moving these Bibles. By the way, not throwing them in the trash, not ripping them up like in the privacy, what she thinks is privacy. No, just taking it and like moving it elsewhere. And then
Pobler Mall Cop
Yeah.
up on this piece.
And
wow,
then
gang, good job.
they give the
you
video.
Can get Bibles for free, literally anywhere. Why are you worried?
No kidding. And then they give this video to a reporter who is
God.
sympathetic to them, who is like now trying to track her down. Like, what do you have to say about this hidden camera footage?
Also a senator. She's just like...
She's a state representative, former state senator, now a state representative. She's been around for a while.
What state is this again? I'm sorry.
Arizona.
Okay,
But basically, let me read you how the Fox propaganda team framed this. The Arizona House of Representatives was alerted about the mysterious disappearance of a pair of holy Bibles on March 23rd.
Bibles is H capitalized? HB capitalized?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
After being alerted to the Bible disappearances, Gumshoes with the House security team started searching the lounge for the Bibles and found that they had been placed underneath cushions of 2 chairs.
Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
No, thank you. Nearly a week later, another Bible went missing from the lounge and was later discovered to have been moved and placed inside a refrigerator.
Nice work, Gumshoes.
In a nearby kitchen. Okay, I'll stop there. But
we go from
it's just
to
the
Norway.
dumbest thing. So the bigger question in all of this is why the hell were there Bibles in the lounge? Fox did not ask that question anywhere because, again, this is not a lawmaker's personal office. It is a communal gathering place inside a government facility. And even if you think what she did was petty, and I am not above that. Like, it's a far bigger problem that the Christian nationalists here, the Christian legislators, just felt like, I can leave the Bible around here for light reading between votes.
Actually sit and read the Bible, or do you think it's actually performative?
First of all, you would never see copies of any other religious book in the lounge because they don't belong there.
Period.
Yeah, and Christian nationalists don't think they should be held to the same standard. Also, to your point, who has time to read the Bible in a government lounge?
Read the bills and stuff.
Who is strolling through the lounge during a break and being like, oh, I need to read the book of Matthew here? Like, what? And by the way...
It's got to brush up on Acts.
Yeah, like I got to remember what it said. Like, you could read a newspaper, you could read a magazine and learn about the shit you're voting on, but
I can't decide if I want to vote to give children food. I'd better check the Bible.
Yep,
Otherwise, how am I supposed to make a decision about this?
I should do this to gay people. Well, all right, I'm set for the next
no notes
session.
Here. Oh my
Stephanie,
God, that's so fucking
Stahl
funny.
Hamilton, by the way, is not like some atheist activist here. Not that there's anything wrong with that. She is an ordained Presbyterian minister. I waited till you were drinking wine to say that. Who currently serves at a church, at a parish. She got her Master's of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary.
Okay.
And she happens to think church and state ought to be separate. Like, yeah. That's it.
I love a vindictive Christian. Oh, it makes my heart sing.
So here's the downside to this.
So funny.
After a reporter started, like, he airs the footage. He tries, like, ambushing her in the hallways. Like, what do you have to say about my hidden video? And she's like, I don't want to talk to you. And, like, walks away. But there was enough pushback on this that she later sent the reporter a brief statement saying just a little playful commentary on the separation of church and state, which I don't love that statement. I would have preferred the books don't belong there, so I was cleaning up, but that's why she's in office and I'm not. But then this week on Wednesday, she apologized on the House floor saying, I realize my actions could be seen as something less than playful, which you didn't have to do that.
That's like a dude not apology. That's cool. She learned that one from Mitch McConnell.
Could be seen as something
I understand that some of you may have been offended.
Here's why I think Republicans are out to get her, though.
Because they want to do their own little Encyclopedia Brown mystery.
Done in 2 pages, and like the answer is like, oh, well, it was the bad guy. A few weeks ago, I think, maybe a few months ago, there was a GOP state representative, a Republican, Liz Harris, who invited a conspiracy theorist and election denier to testify in front of lawmakers. And then that conspiracy theorist started spreading lies and like suggesting, Representative Jessica, I have something to say about you and you're
what do
evil.
You say about me?
Like just horrible things. It was like, even Republicans are like, what the hell is our Republican colleague doing by inviting this person here?
Oh, boy.
And they all, Democrats and a handful of Republicans, voted to expel that person from their caucus.
Was he supposed to be like an expert on something?
I don't know.
Or I'm not sure.
Imagine Carrie Lake, the Republican who ran for governor and is now promoting. She thinks she's governor in her head because of conspiracy theories and election fraud, and she's not. It's one of her acolytes who invited a conspiracy theorist.
Carrie Lake is. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry. I'm glad you don't.
Great.
But the point is, They expelled her from their caucus. She's no longer in office. But the person who filed the ethics complaint against her that got the ball rolling is our friend here, Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. And I think some Republicans are now out to get her for revenge for getting rid of their colleague.
Sure.
And in fact, Carrie Lake, her Carrie Lake War Room account, a member of the Arizona House Democrats stealing Bibles. This is on Twitter. Perhaps
Bibles.
she should be expelled from the legislature. This is an egregious violation of decorum. She should suffer the consequences. She moved Bibles from like one spot to another spot. And then here's the other thing. The current like pro tempore speaker, a Republican in the House, he reacted to the footage where he's like, well, I'm watching that. I'm thinking, well, this is obviously someone who's got some purpose and some intent, and they know they're doing something bad. I don't quite understand the issue of having a Bible available for members to read. Like, he's acting very offended by what just happened. It's like, dude, if you need to read the Bible, you could pick up any of the 1 gazillion copies that are out there. You could pull it up on your phone.
Actual shit to be done.
Not if you're an Arizona Republican.
I'm like being very sincere about this. Like, I don't know much about like running a government, but I have to think it's kind of time consuming.
You would think.
What are they like?
It
between
is for
these
the good
dudes
ones.
And Elon Musk, I am convinced that if you make more than like $80,000 a year, you are required to do nothing.
Yeah. Every dollar above that is a minute you can just troll other
doesn't
people.
It feel like how do you have this much time to go put in a security system and then solve your Nancy Drew mystery? Case of the missing Bibles. No, wait, they just moved 2 foot to the left and went under a couch cushion. Case closed.
There's an Arizona Republic columnist, Lori Roberts. Kudos to her for pointing out that after all of this, she's like, there's no indication any of these Republicans have ever opened the book in the first place. And she pointed out, I'm quoting her, I look at some of the things happening in the legislature this year, the demonization of immigrants in search of asylum, the targeting of the LGBTQ community, and in particular, transgender children, ... But then perhaps some of them, Republicans, haven't gotten to the part in the scriptures about loving thy neighbor or doing unto others the way you would have them do unto you. Like, point taken. Yeah, if these people care so much about the Bible, you would think maybe open it up to the Jesus stuff and get something good out of it. But no, that's not their thing. They're not interested.
I know that's such a well we return to so much, but it's really hard to understand what the fuck is going on. You know what I mean? Like, what? I'm just having a big moment of clarity right now of like, these people are so fucking obsessed with the Bible that they're pitching a fit because one was put in the refrigerator, which is a 12 out of 10 goof.
Trying to keep it cool for you.
I mean, it's how Joey saved himself from The Shining. Hashtag friends reference.
Yeah.
You got a reference. But like, truly, really and truly, what are they pulling from the Bible that is guiding their morals?
It's not. It's all for show. It's all to make a point about which religion matters.
They think they are doing Christian shit, right?
I mean, I think they all just do their shit, and then when someone reminds them, like, why did you do it? Oh, because of the Bible. Like it's the excuse.
They retrofit it into their opinion already.
They retrofit the Bible into their cruelty.
That tracks.
Which, by the way, that's my job to point that out. So I appreciate that they're doing the work for us. I don't know. Let me jump to this story that made headlines as well. Last Saturday night, an 18-year-old high school senior named B, like the letter B, Hayes, went viral because B was standing outside the prom and was holding a sign. And it says, "They wouldn't let me in because I'm in a suit." And the idea here is B is cis female, from what I can gather. And the school officials wanted B to wear some prom dress. Mm-hmm. B wanted to wear a suit. Mm-hmm. And then they wouldn't allow B into prom.
Right.
Which is like, and by the way, part of me was like, is this weird? Because how'd you have a sign ready to go? And I think they did inform B ahead of time, if you don't wear a dress, we are not going to let you in. So B came prepared with the sign, got the picture. And you know what? Good on high schoolers for being prepared to take advantage of social media, because that picture went viral.
I'm really curious, like, obviously it's just some like 45-year-old dude like making the call at the door. But what if like somebody I have like 15 onesies now, jumpsuits, right? Like that are technically pants, but they are formal wear or whatever. Like these are not to like slope it all, but like it's so stupid to be like, oh, you have to dress like masculine, feminine, because that's not how fashion do anymore, and it hasn't ever.
Let me read you first. I will get to the dress code for prom, but let me read you what B wrote. My name is B. Hayes. This is on Instagram. I'm 18 years old. I've been attending Nashville Christian School, that's the name of it, for 13 years. My senior prom was today. I wasn't allowed in the doors because I was wearing a suit. I should not have to conform to femininity to attend my senior prom. I will not compromise who I am to fit in a box. Who are you to tell us what it means to be a woman?
Nice,
so,
B.
Excellent
post.
Well said. Like I said, apparently B was told in advance the school would not allow them in without a dress. So the sign was part of what I assume is a planned protest. Sure. What I don't get here, and we'll get to the dress code thing, but like setting aside the desire to conform to femininity, I mean, if you're worried about like modesty or something, a pantsuit or a suit shows way less skin than most prom dresses.
Such a good point.
Like you could congratulate me for the modesty. But none of this is new. Like in 2015, I had to look this one up because I was like, when did this happen? In 2015, a different Christian prom kicked out a male student for wearing a kilt because they were like,
kilt?
Yes, which was personal to that student, but it didn't matter.
Bad call.
I will say, here's the upside to this whole story. And there's a few upsides to this whole story. One is that classmates, like current classmates, are going on Instagram and social media saying like, we tried to let school officials let you in. Like, we were fighting for you, which is great to see. Even the DJ at the dance chimed in on Instagram. Here's the post on Instagram as a comment on B's post. My name is Neo, and I was the DJ at your prom. Like, I'm assuming this is not a fake, but so take it with a grain of salt. But
I mean, this sounds like a dad typing, yes.
Yeah. It was just brought to my attention you were denied entry. It breaks my heart to know you've experienced this. Had I known at the beginning, I would have done something. I'm sorry I wasn't aware. If you have a graduation party or any celebration this year, as long as I'm not booked on that day, I'd be honored to DJ for you for free. You let me know. We'll hook it up. You have an ally in me.
Oh, this sweet boy.
That's awesome.
Oh, I bet he had like a shiny purple vest.
Also,
and spiky hair, and told you how to do the cha-cha slide.
Yes. Here's another thing. Hayes' post was shared with Nashville business owners who own a place called AB Hillsboro Village, which is another event venue in Nashville. And basically, they called up B to see whether they'd be interested in a prom of their own. Invite 25 friends.
Stop it.
I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll see. But like, you have companies reaching out to say like, we want to help out, which is awesome. So the reaction, like, I don't know what the school was hoping to accomplish, but if, like, at a time when Christian schools are struggling for attention, I'm sure this is not the way, even if you say, well, this is part of our code, we had the rules in place, like, I'm sure this is not the attention you want. Right. I can't imagine this is the attention you want.
And on the other side of their mouth, they're going to say, how come kids don't want to go to church anymore? Like, it's so wild. And truly, like, I have a student who is going to prom on Saturday, and she identifies as female, but she wears fucking suits to proms because that's how she feels comfortable. And it just tears my heart in half to think of this student of mine having to stand outside of her prom because she doesn't dress in a way that's like cool with a bunch of 50-year-olds. Like, what are we doing exactly?
Here's another question. The prom took place, the event venue in Nashville where they held the prom was ironically called Loveless Cafe.
Get the fuck out of my life.
I think
marketing professionals.
I wonder if that's named after the person who founded it or something, probably. But here's the question. Like, I don't know if they had any rules about, like, who they work with. And maybe they didn't know about the dress code. Maybe they didn't know about B. Like, they're not the enemies here. They're not the ones who said, get out of prom. But they do advertise on a website called The Knot, which is a wedding website. And The Knot has a policy of we're not working with groups that are bigoted and discriminatory. So the question is, what I want to know, and I did ask them and I didn't get a response, is what is their policy on working with discriminatory organizations, including a private Christian high school that is obviously anti-LGBTQ and does stuff like this? I want to know if they have a policy on that. Did they not know? Or will they say like, well, from now on, we're going to make sure in our contract or whatever. I don't know.
I mean, if I had to wager a guess, I think they would say dress code. We are not consulted on dress codes. Like, why would we?
But will they sign a contract with any organization that is openly bigoted?
So you're saying now that they know what's your next
because
move?
If the answer is we'll work with anybody, it's Nashville. We got to take what we can get in our area. Not that Nashville's small, but then they shouldn't be allowed to advertise on a website that explicitly touts its inclusivity. Here's another thing. The school, Nashville Christian School, a spokesperson said, basically confirmed most of this story, didn't deny any of it, but they said the school's expectations regarding appropriate prom attire were communicated to this student and the student's family in advance of prom. While we certainly respect a student's right to disagree, all of our students know from our school handbook that when they do not follow such expectations at school-sponsored events, they may be asked to leave.
So they're addressing not the root issue. They're addressing, well, she broke a rule and these are the consequences to break a rule. They are not addressing, here is why we have these rules and why they are valuable, because they aren't.
So I looked at their handbook. What do they say about and they actually had a special section on the junior-senior banquet, which is their name for prom. And by the way, here's what it said that's relevant. Students may not attend banquet with a student of the same gender or sex.
Oh.
So they got to get the bigotry in there.
Dynamite.
Then one section on dress expectations. Here's what it says. All students should choose banquet attire that is appropriate for modesty and consistent with the biblical principles to guide student behavior and the statement of faith, yada, yada, yada.
Well, that's a pretty big...
That's very vague.
Very vague.
It's modesty. Going back to the suit question.
So it does not...
that shows less skin than the dresses.
Totally.
So modesty is check.
So it doesn't delineate between genders aside from you can't go with somebody of your same gender.
That is correct.
So it's all at the discretion of whomever is
doesn't say a girl can't wear a suit.
There's no rules that say a dog can't play basketball.
That's exactly right. So again, I go back to even if B technically broke the rules, I don't know which rule, but let's say that happened. What did the school accomplish by banning the student from prom? Because instead of giving students a memorable last high school experience, big memory, it'll now be known as the night the school kicked out one of our friends for wearing a suit.
It's going to be the night that launched 1,000 activists.
Yeah. Let's hope.
Can you imagine anything that's more energizing than watching a friend of yours get discriminated against?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. I see what it looks like now.
I would love to see a statement from the rest of these students at the school saying, we're just pledging as seniors that whenever we make money and have a job, none of it's going to this school.
Right.
We're never going to be donors to our school. And we encourage you not to either. That would be glorious. I have not seen that yet. But kudos to B for not just publicizing the absurdity of the school's narrow-mindedness, but having the foresight to say, oh, I'm coming to prom with the sign because I know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make this shit go viral so everyone knows.
These kids know what the fuck is up.
Don't blame B for going to a Christian school because you don't know the circumstances. Parents send their kids to these schools all the time.
Or they could be Christian.
Or they could be Christian.
Yeah,
that is very true.
Yeah.
Hell of a way to leave a mark as you're graduating.
Wow,
I love it.
B, that is a really courageous story. Good for you. Here's hoping good things in the future.
And with that, let's go to Mississippi, where all good things happen all the time. A federal judge has ordered Mississippi to allow religious people to avoid childhood vaccinations as a prerequisite to enter public schools.
Jesus Christ, Mississippi.
Yeah. The judge, Sewell Ozerden, who is a right-wing judge, member of the Federalist Society, basically...
How do you spell that first
I don't know. Don't worry about it. But the Mississippi State Department of Health basically says no religious exemptions on this stuff.
Right.
And the immunizations you need to enter public school, or private school for that matter, involve vaccines against... or immunizations against diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, polio, hepatitis, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox. Yeah, kids, get your shots. That's what you got to do. Now, the state says we do allow medical exemptions to this stuff.
states do.
Not as many as I was surprised to learn. But I will say, for all the...
What?
I think reputationally, I have it somewhere here, but reputationally, you might think like, oh God, Mississippi officials, oh no, this is not going to end well. Mississippi State, like the state's Department of Health, really good on this stuff. Really good on this stuff. So they're like, look, we do allow medical exemptions because there are medical reasons some people may not be able to take their vaccines.
Right.
But the only reason they're allowed to do that is because the percentage of students who have a legitimate medical beef to get a vaccine is really small. And vaccines only work if as many people as possible get them. Just to give you some numbers behind this, measles, for example, measles vaccines only work if 95% of the population is protected. Then the disease cannot spread due to herd immunity. That's why you can allow medical exemptions, because you're literally saying, okay, if like a handful of you can't get it, that's fine, assuming everyone else can and does, because then the vaccine, the disease cannot spread.
So
that's
what you're
the
saying
idea.
is we live in a society and we're all supposed to be here to
We have to take care of
support-
each other.
Okay, except for in the state of Mississippi.
Right, where a conservative Christian group basically has argued that, well, if you allow exemptions for anything, you got to give it for everything, which doesn't
absolutely
make any
no.
sense. The ruling never says why the families in question, the plaintiffs, don't want to be vaccinated, but one of them did say this publicly. One of the families, according to the lawsuit they initially filed, says, God has created humans with functioning immune systems that were well designed to counteract threats.
Hey, do you happen to know the infant mortality rate of like, I don't know, 100 years ago?
A lot.
A whole fucking lot. There's a reason people used to have like 12 children, and it's because half of them literally died in infancy. Our immune systems actually blow when you put them up against, I don't know, a really dirty city where you're drinking poop water.
Yeah.
But anyway,
And diseases your body has not encountered before. And by the way, our immune systems are not perfect. You know what else is not perfect? Any other part of our body.
No.
Because I'm guessing the plaintiffs in this case have no problem wearing glasses for their broken eyes, or getting braces for their broken teeth, or taking Tylenol for a headache, because that happens. But they think, well, if there's a deadly pandemic, my body will just take care of it. They refuse to acknowledge that all those diseases that they're like, I don't get it. I don't have polio. I'm good. That's because other people took their vaccines. They got their vaccines. They were eradicated because of vaccines, and they're making a comeback because of ignorant, selfish people like these people.
I really encourage, if you're ever going to talk to an anti-vaxxer, which I would not, to be clear, recommend ever.
And if you do, do it at a distance.
But if
Over
you
Zoom.
do, I would use polio as the sort of preeminent example of vaccines work, because when's the last fucking time you've seen somebody with polio?
Yeah. This is a Texas-based group that is doing this in Mississippi. It's called the Informed Consent Action Network. And here's their argument. The state of Mississippi...
I can?
Yeah, I don't know. The state of Mississippi affords a secular exemption to those with medical reasons that prohibit vaccination. Yep.
I need to dig really deep into the fact that they called something
Hold
medical
that thought.
secular.
We're going to come right back to that. I'm going to finish the sentence. Yes. Let me finish the statement. The state of Mississippi affords a secular exemption to those with medical reasons that prohibit vaccination, ... It has simply chosen to not accord an exemption when it's someone's immortal soul that a parent believes would be at risk.
Calm down.
Now,
Their
to your
immortal soul,
point-
what about their physical body?
Yeah. To your point, having a medical exemption from a vaccine, that is not the same as a secular, like, well, I don't want to get it for personal reasons. I have a personal conscientious reason I don't want to get vaccinated. That would be a secular exemption from the rule. That the Supreme Court now has said, well, if you're giving a secular exemption for that, you can't say no to a religious exemption for other reasons. Like, I think that's the game they're trying to play here. But a medical exemption is not a secular one. That's literally a
That
different
is
category of stuff.
A bananas and so deeply dishonest way to describe that.
They're not secular in any meaningful way. If the state allowed conscientious objections, maybe the religious side would have a point. But claiming the state can already accommodate students that are unvaccinated, which is what they said, without noting that the math and the science don't work if additional accommodations are permitted, shows you the sort of people we're dealing with.
I kind of hate that they use the term conscientious objector.
That's me using it.
Oh, is
That's
it you?
not them.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying, like,
I think it's a bad term then.
if you said, I don't want to fight in a war, Vietnam or whatever, because I have personal reasons against it, I would argue, okay, there's your non-religious reason you don't want to do it. And if someone says, well, my religion prohibits me going to war, okay, fine. We can argue if those are on the same playing field or whatever. In the case of vaccines, though, medical exemption, different category. That is not a personal belief you have. I don't get it. Now, here's going back to Mississippi's Department of Health has been good about this. They have not said if they will appeal this ruling, but on vaccines, this is to the earlier point, Mississippi is only one of only 6 states that does not allow religious exemptions to vaccine requirements.
Really?
Illinois ain't one of them. Yeah, like it's one of the only aspects of healthcare the state gets right. And actually, one of the past presidents of the Mississippi chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics said, like, our high vaccination rates should be preserved and protected. He said, we're at the bottom of the heap in so many health metrics.
Truly.
But at the top of the heap in protecting our children from vaccine-preventable illness. I think that comes from a sense of community, and it has endured for decades that we take care of ourselves and we take care of those around us.
Wow.
That's what he said, and he's right. So kudos to the State Department of Health. They have until July 15th right now to allow religious exemptions in their school requirements unless they appeal, and I hope they do because, holy shit, this is a horrible idea.
Is July 15th the deadline for, like, the upcoming school year, or is it the deadline to file an appeal for this?
That's the legal filing to the judge who said you got to give these people a religious exemption said, I'm giving Mississippi until July 15th to change their rules.
I see.
But they could appeal before then, and I hope they
see.
do. So anyway, yeah, so that's disturbing. Here's a story I was dying to talk to you about because I don't know if everyone agrees on this, so I'm very curious what you think.
Boy.
Okay, Minneapolis, very progressive city. Minnesota overall, not entirely progressive, but Minneapolis, super progressive. They just became the first city in the country to allow broadcasts of the Muslim call to prayer over loudspeakers, like at any time of the day. And here's what I'm getting at. So, like, they have to pray several times a day, especially like during the holy parts of the year. And they have, like, I'm just going to say, like, a horn that sounds when it's time for everyone to pray. And during the pandemic, when not everyone can gather in one place, maybe I could understand making an exception for that. Like, all right, you can do it even though it's early in the morning or whatever. Right. But they just passed an ordinance in the city to say you can always do your calls to prayer. You can use amplification systems to amplify that sound, like a loud moan, whatever. It's a loud, like, cattle call type of moan. And you could do it at any hour of the day. And the question is, how far should these religious exemptions apply? Because until this was passed, the city's previous noise control ordinance, they said no sounds are allowed that are 10 decibels over the ambient sound level during the day.
Okay.
No loud noises during the day. And it can't be more than 5 decibels over at night. Basically, you can't be too loud in public spaces. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But there are some exceptions to the rule that were already in place. What are those exceptions? Certain vehicles that are just loud.
The only thing I could think of.
Yeah. The University of Minnesota's athletic events, those got to pass.
Okay, fair.
Right? But when it came to religious worship, the city said bells or chimes, they can ring no more than 10 minutes per hour.
Okay.
No more than 1 hour all day. But only between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. So if your church has a big bell that you like to ring, you can do it in small doses, but when people are awake.
Okay.
Right? That was their old rule. Loudness is acceptable.
Quiet hours of the dorm. This feels reasonable so far.
Like, don't be too loud outside of the hours because people have sleep to get and
Tell
shit
that
to
people
do, right?
fucking drag racing behind the mile.
There you go. So the new ordinance changes those rules
Okay.
specifically to benefit Muslims. Because what it says is, here's the new rule. Sounds created by bells, chimes, carillons, amplifying equipment, that was added, because that's what Muslims use, that's what the mosques use, or blah, blah, blah. And then they crossed out the line that said between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., meaning you could
24
do it at
hours.
any time. Yeah, so that means this call to prayer, which are broadcast 5 times a day at Ramadan, and could begin as early as 3:30 a.m. during the summer solstice.
That's still late for me. It's
and
not
early for normal people.
Uh-huh.
So again, this request was made in 2020 during the pandemic. And at the time, one of the local Muslim leaders said, if we cannot be physically together, at least this echo, this voice, this call to prayer can be an extension of us being together at this difficult time. And again, Minneapolis has a large Somali Muslim population. This is a huge part of their community. This is the district that elected Ilhan Omar. So like, I get why they would say, yeah, listen, we're all making sacrifices during the pandemic. This seems like a reasonable thing we could do for our Muslim population. I'm not even arguing that. But even then, when they allowed the amplification to happen in 2020, even they said, yeah, but between those hours that we gave you, right?
So who was the one who decided to take away, like who redlined it? Who was the one who decided to take away the time frame? Like, do we have a person or
it
a
was
committee?
a 12-0 vote of the city council.
Really?
Yeah, it was unanimous. 3 Muslim city council members pushed for the change, but it was a 12-0 vote. And now the new rule applies to nearly 24 mosques all over the city, which is good for the Somali Muslim immigrants who live in Minneapolis. But like usually this, and I should say, this is, I said it's specific to Muslims. The ordinance in paper does not say that, but it's not like Christians and Jews were itching to ring their bells at like 2 a.m. So like part of me is like good on these progressive politicians to go out of their way to support the desires of a often ignored, much maligned religious minority.
Right.
I want to congratulate them for that. On the other hand, sleep.
Sure.
So I don't know.
I
do have more to say, but yeah, chime
I
in.
have 2 questions. Do you know the racial makeup of the
City council?
City council?
Off the top of my head, no.
Or the religious?
It's more diverse than you would expect.
Okay, so
Religious
it's-
diversity, again, 3 Muslims, and I assume a handful of others.
So when he said 3 Muslims, that's the totality of the
I
Muslim?
believe so,
Okay,
yes.
so that was going to be my first question. Second, I'm really having a hard time wrapping my arms around what the sound is. Like, how disruptive is it? How long is it? How, like...
Have you ever heard, like, a tornado alarm go off, like, when they're testing it, like, once a month in a city? It's like that.
First Tuesday of every month.
It's like that. It's that noise.
Okay.
Again.
So it's noticeable, but not
Noticeable
necessarily,
and loud.
like...
They're not saying prayers over the loudspeakers for the whole community.
But I'm saying it's not like, okay, for, 1 minute every hour, you can't fucking hear anything besides these things. That does
No,
not appear
it's
to
not
be
that.
the case.
So the Minneapolis
Are there
Star Tribune.
complaints against it?
Not yet.
Okay, that's
but
my...
no
like,
one's heard it at 2 a.m. and had to be woken up by it who's not Muslim. That's where I'm going with this. Like, it's not a problem yet, but I wonder what's going to happen when this actually gets implemented and people start using it. The Minneapolis Star Tribune published an editorial last week saying, basically, you should pass this and it's a great idea.
Why?
And here's what they said. One need not be Muslim to appreciate the beauty of the call to prayer any more than one must be Christian to enjoy the peals of church bells on Sunday mornings, ... Hopefully, such a soundscape also reinforces the perception that these different communities are not visitors, but full-fledged residents of the city. Which I think is a horrible defense of a bad policy, because the issue is not that we are giving mosques the ability to make noise just like we do from churches. It's that sounds from a mosque will be allowed to break the silence before the sun comes up, and this law was changed specifically to make that possible.
Yeah.
And in 2020, when everyone's making sacrifices, as they should, the Freedom from Religion Foundation wrote a letter to the mayor, Jacob Fry, basically saying, listen, if you change the rule to allow this exception to happen, that is a blatant violation of church-state separation. Basically, they said, while we support your desires to provide comfort for Minneapolis's Muslim community during this time of crisis, the exemption from the city's noise control ordinance impermissibly favors Islam over all other religions. They went on to say, Minneapolis's noise ordinance is a reasonable restriction meant to foster a peaceful, quiet community with a well-rested population. It is a neutral and generally applicable statute. Now, this week, FFRF basically reissued that warning, pointing out there's nothing now stopping evangelical Christians, just to name one group, from blasting out religious messages or worship music at, ungodly hours of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens when a Christian says, well, the rule does, going back to the rules don't say the dog can't play basketball. What happens when a Christian says, well, I think at 2 a.m. what everyone needs to hear is come to Jesus, and let me just play 10 minutes of my sermon from last week over a loudspeaker that we can buy because we're richer than most of these places.
Right. Okay.
Like, what's stopping them from doing that? And at that point, will they learn they've made a mistake?
Well, and the problem is then if that does happen, if Christians do try to squeeze in through that loophole and then the rules try to change, then
and
it's
that's
Christian persecution.
Of course.
Here's what I'll say. I have nothing that I disagree with about what you just read. The thing about it's a reasonable expectation, I think that is 100% right. That said, I am right now not up in arms about it.
Sure.
Maybe because it is for Muslims, which is a marginalized group in this country. So maybe that's why I'm cutting it more slack, but maybe that's not good of me. But
I think at a time when religious conservatives have used their political power to shove Christianity on constituents, and we see that every time at all levels of government, the proper pushback should be religious neutrality, not giving a different religion the ability to annoy everybody else.
I think that's a good point.
And the thing is, the old noise ordinance worked fine. It applied to everybody. There was no reason to modify it, especially if the idea behind the call to prayer is, hey, we need to remind you that this is the time right now. Get an alarm clock. Get Zoom. Use robocalls. Do a phone tree in your mosque. There are plenty of ways to get people up early that don't involve me waking up everybody else.
Text blasts.
Right? We could all, we could all use more religious tolerance these days, but rubber stamping a rule for one group in particular is not the way to do it.
I'm still confused about how we got here. Who was it who, is there a person who was hey.
I think this was the Muslims in the community asked for this.
Interesting.
They asked to make that 2020 exception a rule. Thanks for giving it to us. We want to make sure it applies moving forward. So, codify it. And the city council's all right.
But we're also taking out it sounds like the council was the ones who.
They not only did they say, yeah, we'll give you the ability to do it, and because our current rules say you can't go before 7 a.m., but sometimes the calls to prayer need to be earlier.
I see.
Then we'll just take out that line.
So they're just, we don't want anything to interfere with
your
these
religious
sounds
worship
happening at the appropriate time for whatever prayer it is.
And I don't think that's the right way. You can be religiously neutral, which is what you want from a government, without bending over backwards for religious groups by making them all, giving them all the permission to be more annoying at all hours of the day. That's not the way to do this. You could have easily said, well, the rules apply to everybody, so figure out something else for 3 a.m.
Right, and it also feels a little bit to me like those big prayer tent concert things that are so loud and disruptive in town. They happen mostly in 2020, right? They would
Greg
go.
Locke now in Tennessee, who has a circus tent church.
This is what I'm trying to
so loud, and people in the community are you got to put a stop to this. And the city council appears to be afraid to pass any noise ordinance that would get in his way because they're afraid he would come after them.
Wild. This is not a thing I ever thought I would have to think about, is whether an alarm can go off in a city at 4 a.m.
Right.
That's kind of cuckoo bananas crazy. Well, also, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, you said it's about ambient, above the ambient noise. Because I'm just thinking
because the city makes noise. A
That's
big
what I was
city's going to make a lot
when
of noise.
When I lived in Uptown, there was a train a block away from me, and that was loud all night. But that's just part
and you
and
get
parcel
used
of living
to
in the
that.
city.
But again, giving more groups permission to make more noise at all hours, that is opening the door to a community you don't want to live in.
This really, really, really is surprising that this happened. I'm very, very shocked that Muslims were able to kind of have the voting block.
I'm not surprised they got it in Minneapolis. That's where they would get it in compared to a lot of other cities. But it doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Interesting. Very interesting.
All right, I'm going to get to some happy news for once.
Yay.
I'll save it toward the end of the show. Interesting statistic that came out this week. Roughly 2 out of every 3 Americans now agrees with what atheists have always said. You don't need God to be good.
Oh.
This is from the Pew Research Center. 65% of U.S. adults say it is not necessary to believe in God in order to be moral and have good values.
Cool.
Just 3 years ago, it was 54%. It jumped up to 65. The number is even higher for people who are under 50, or people with a college degree, or people who identify as liberal, and people with no religious affiliation. I mean, no surprise there. But, here's who do you think thinks you need God to be good? 2 groups, really. Black Protestants, white evangelicals. And, that's not surprising necessarily. So the question to toss out here is, well, why is that? Why do more people than ever before in America seem to accept that you don't need God to be good?
Because they've been paying attention to what's been going on. I do not know how anybody can think you can use God to be good at this point, because all we see time and time again are examples of people using their religion as a cudgel to hurt marginalized people. So
the name of our podcast.
Is it? It's pretty long.
It is very long. That's why it doesn't do well on iTunes. But
Offer code. Some people use their cudgel as a religion.
I would say just to go through the demographic listings, the way they broke it up, I get why it would apply to young people, because they've been surrounded by people from different religious backgrounds their entire life.
Right.
And especially people with no religious faith at all.
Right.
Same with people probably with a formal college degree, because you were surrounded by people who didn't think like you, who didn't come from the same background, and you're like, well, I like those people. They're nice. Why would I think they're bad?
Why do you guys think these guys are monsters?
Yeah.
They just want to get stoned and watch Bob's Burgers with me. They're great.
Yeah, it's easy to see the good in people who don't share your background when you're surrounded by them, and when you're also more likely to hear about or be affected by religious cruelty and hypocrisy.
Truly.
And by the way, case in point, the least religious nations in the world have no problem separating faith from morality. I mean, Sweden, Australia, Canada, these are all places where religious affiliation has plummeted in recent years, and they were overwhelmingly likely to say you don't need to believe in God to be good.
Wow.
So we're at 65%, but in other countries, that's just Canada's at 73, 65%. Netherlands is at 76,
Sweden's low in the Netherlands.
Sweden's at 90.
Okay, that's what I was expecting.
Everything in Sweden is just better. Here's the surprising thing. What was the number for Republicans? What % of Republicans say you don't need God to be good?
Say you do not need
God
to
They're
be good. I would
our
say
side on this.
35%.
59.
Fuck off.
Really? Which seems contrary.
I woke up the dog.
Again, there's a difference between Republicans writ large, including a lot of people who are just like, well, I've been a conservative my whole life.
Reagan Republicans.
Versus the Republicans who are in elected office.
Yeah, Reagan and Trump Republicans are both monsters, but different flavor monsters.
Yeah. So 59% of Republicans say you can be good without God. And ideologically speaking, it makes a little more sense. There's actually... the U.S. was only second to Poland when it came to the gap between what those on the right and left believe on this subject. Even though
Poland,
even though most of our liberals and conservatives agree you don't need God to be good, our discrepancy is probably larger than everybody else.
Oh, I see what you mean.
But it's not that far apart, all things said.
Okay.
Interesting to point out. There's again, 51% of people who claim they're on the right, 51% said you don't need God to be good. They're on the right, separate from Republican. But still.
To me.
Yeah.
51. And what was the Republicans overall?
59.
50. So nearly 2 out of 3 card-carrying Republicans.
Republican or lean Republican, yeah.
Don't think you need to be religious.
73% of moderate Republicans.
I hope I hope people younger than us can understand like what these numbers mean. I really, really, really hope like not to
Here's
be
another
like
context
kids
for
these
you.
days.
Oh, I know.
But
It wasn't like this back in the day.
But like, was it George H.W. Bush who said something about like if they're if you don't believe in God, you're not really an American or something?
He didn't actually say that. It's an urban legend, but you are right that that's who is attributed to saying like I don't believe they should be considered citizens.
Can I
but
just,
he never
even though
actually
that's
said
not
it.
a true story, I'm really excited that I remembered the story
Yes.
and assigned it to the correct president.
Yes.
Again, not true.
Interesting number here.
Good memory, Jess.
Moderate Republicans, of the three of them who are left, 73% say you can be good without God. Only 62% of conservative Democrats say the same thing. So on
Wait,
this
could you repeat
issue,
those numbers?
moderate Republicans are more likely to agree
You
with
said
us.
73%
than
versus
the 62% of conservative Democrats.
Wow, and that's an 11-point difference too.
Huge,
That's
yeah.
not small.
So again, I think overall, to your
Wow.
point of like, this is a big sea change from what it was before, like, we don't have to play offense on this in the sense of like trying to show
Truly.
people you can have morality without religion, because for two reasons. One is, well, you all know someone who's not religious, even if they're not like card-carrying atheists,
Right.
and they're fine, and you're fine with them, and you're
Right.
comfortable with them.
Right.
And on the flip side, we've seen what religious people have done in the name of their faith, whether they're politicians or religious leaders or whatever.
or
And, like,
terrorists. Like,
yeah,
listen, it's
yeah.
hard when we live in an age of constant terror. It's hard not like how can people not sweep all of those things together? Like yes, like September 11th was the thing that defined our generation,
Right.
But people younger
And those,
than us,
if
it
you
is
say those
just,
are extremists, but if you go to like who's supporting guns in schools that make kids'
Yeah.
lives a living hell,
That's what I'm
those are your
saying.
mainstream Christians
Right.
who
'Cause
go to your evangelical
our
church.
yours and my precipitating event was September 11th. For them, it's I have to imagine when they're our
I
age,
want
it's going to
live
be
and go to school.
It's going to be every 2 weeks for my entire childhood. I heard of a new mass murder, and it's all in the name of white supremacy and / or Christian nationalism, or broader. It can be Muslims and all that shit. People are not. I can't think of that many figures who are considered like capital G good by society, who are known for being religious. For example, like Dolly Parton is somebody that like everybody's fucking down with. Everyone loves a
Right.
Dolly Parton. She's great. Can you think of a sort of preeminent Christian person who, like Joel Osteen used
like
to be
back in the
it?
day, Billy Graham was
Billy
the
Graham
guy
would
they
have
would
been
say
it.
respected, one of the most respected Americans, and
Can you
he's
pull
obviously
anybody
known.
off?
I'll find that list for you, but no, there are some people whose names show up on those lists because they've always been on those lists. But you're right, a lot of the most respected people are not necessarily. There may be politicians, the president of any part, like Donald Trump is on that list. It doesn't mean much. It's just who's the most famous.
Right.
It's a popularity contest.
Right.
But it's hard to envision. There's a lot of outspoken Christians who not only have the support of Christians, but also have broader appeal than
Yeah.
that. I mean, Joel Osteen, disliked by a lot of Christians.
Right.
He's just famous. But like
He really
Franklin Graham has his whole career has been, let me make sure my name is associated with the worst kind of Christianity.
Right.
So
Very interesting.
I mean, the ghost of Billy Graham is probably the most popular Christian in the country at this point.
Very interesting.
He's looking up at us. It's fine. Here's a shocking story that I had to read this twice because it's unbelievable what the American Humanist Association stopped recently. Here's the backstory. In October of 2020, the American Humanist Association filed a federal lawsuit against the Marietta Public Schools in Oklahoma and some of the administrators. And I was shocked by, like, if you're filing a federal lawsuit, like, some shit had to go down. It's like, well, what did this public school district do? What they did is they had a special program in the school district, and it was called, wait for it,
What?
missionaries.
Come on, gang.
And what do they do? Several
Had
Christian
sex
missionaries.
face to face.
They don't do sex education there. So, nope. Several Christian missionaries just came into the classrooms once a month during school hours and
Just chat.
preached Christianity for 30, 60 minutes to kids as young as pre-K. What if you did not want your children to attend? Too bad.
Shit for
no alternatives for you.
And this is a public school or private
All
school?
public.
Okay.
And parents did not know this was happening because they were not given permission slips to allow their kids to do any of this. All of this happened in normal classrooms. sometimes as a substitute for regular classes. The adults who taught kids regularly were there while all this was happening. The administrators promoted all this with emails and announcements. And according to the lawsuit, the classes promoted Christianity, Jesus, and God belief. Bibles were distributed to pre-K students by the missionaries. And the district described the class as character education. So all this was happening in 2020. How did we even know this was happening? Also in the lawsuit. This was wild. Like I said, this is one of those things I'm reading this like a novel because it's insane. Right. Here's how we found out about this. In 2019, a mom picked up her daughter from school, and after driving in the car for a little while, this girl was 5. After driving in the car for a while, the girl asked, "Mom, is God real?" And when the mom asked the girl, "Oh, what prompted you to ask me that?" The girl said, "Well, these people came and sang songs and told us a story about God and how he's real." And the mom told the girl,
God.
"I did not teach you that."
I just imagine the dolly zoom from Jaws as she realizes what's happening to her daughter.
Yeah, close up on the face. And the girl also said, the mom had said out loud, "Well, I don't think God is real." The girl said, "Well, I couldn't say that in class." And the one of the administrators, quote, "told me not to say that or I'd get in trouble." Also, a gym teacher named in the lawsuit apparently corrected that little girl to tell her that God is real. And basically, her parents also said that every time those missionaries came to visit the school, their daughter's, quote, cheerful temperament would noticeably degrade.
No, this sweet poor girl.
And
no,
even
she's
when
5?
even when the parents wrote a note opting her out of the preaching class, the school made her attend anyway.
Get the fuck out.
So,
what about parental rights? I thought these guys were all about that shit.
Only apply to Christians who
again.
don't want you to read books. So it took a while. This was all 2020. They filed this lawsuit. This week, the American Humanist Association reached a settlement with the school district, which is fine, that will put an end to this program for good. This is from the AHA. As part of the settlement agreement, the school will issue a public statement recognizing the constitutional violation of the program and affirming that it will not be reinstated. The school also agreed to pay damages to that family.
Yes. I love when they don't mince terms,
right?
you know?
And here's the thing. Typically, damages in a civil lawsuit like this usually come out to $1. It's all symbolic.
Yeah.
But in this case, they said the family's going to receive $12,000.
Okay.
Which is way more than symbolic.
Well, that's a good vacation.
And while we don't know the exact terms of everything here, the AHA pointed out the significance of the victory. I mean, it reaffirms, I'm quoting, it reaffirms the right of freedom of conscience for all. It's a victory for education, understanding, and tolerance. Countering misinformation with education about the true meaning of the First Amendment will reduce the likelihood that this kind of egregious constitutional violation will happen again. I will say, I did check the school's website, the district's website. I have not seen that apology statement yet. I'm sure it's coming because I can't imagine
What's the timeline of this?
I don't know what the timeline is. That's the terms of the settlement that I don't know.
Gotcha.
But glad they won, glad they stuck to this, and even though it took a couple years to get there, and I hope that girl's doing okay, whoever she is.
Yeah, that's such a story.
Right? And the last one for you today, which is horrifying, and it's not news anywhere in the U.S. because it's only really in Australia where this was happening. Here's the backstory. I did not know about this because it's an Australia-specific story, but it's such a big deal that it appeared on 60 Minutes Australia. So, it's a big story.
Okay.
In 2020, there was a driver. His name is not important. He was working for a company driving trucks. And he basically went to his boss and said, listen, I am high on drugs.
Whoop.
I have not slept much. And I'm under the curse of a witch. Correct answer there should be, well, you should not be behind the wheel.
No.
That's what the right boss would do. Instead, this guy's boss, famously in Australia, his name is Simon Tuteru. He basically said, drive.
I bet it's Tutoroo.
Tutoroo.
That'd be my guess. It's very Australian sounding.
Fine. 46 minutes later, the driver veers off the highway, and there were cops who had pulled someone over for speeding, killed 4 cops on the road because this driver who should not have been driving veered off the side of the road. Devastating accident.
And he
four
was having
innocent
a
people.
full psychological break.
Clearly, something was up. And that guy, by the way, the driver, was sentenced to jail in 2021. He's going to spend.
Survived?
He survived.
Oh.
He'll spend the next 18 years in jail. So
my
fine, because you
God.
shouldn't have been behind a car and what the hell's going on? So fine, whatever. I'm not even getting into him. He's not the story.
Yeah, you're
The
right.
story is that, okay, you could tell why this became a national story because
Right.
4 cops died. That's a thing.
preventable.
It was preventable. Never
It's
should have
about
happened.
capitalism and greed, and people don't matter. People are cogs. All of it.
Sure. Here's the thing. Tudoru, he was charged with manslaughter also, the boss,
Okay.
but he wasn't sentenced. And then last year, in the state of Victoria, the Victorian Director of Public Prosecutions, like their Attorney General sort of thing, dropped all the charges.
Really?
Weird. And we didn't really know what's up with that. And like, obviously, if you're the victims' families, that's been weighing on you. Like, how come the guy who made the decision that cost my loved one their life didn't face any punishment for this?
I am
Mm-hmm.
just on the edge of my seat about how religion is going to play into this. I'm kind of nervous.
Because you know it is. Because
yeah,
that's why we're
talking about
it.
it on
Right.
this show.
And here's the thing. What we did know, what we knew before they did any investigations or anything, is that this guy, Tudoru, he prayed for the driver before the driver went on the road.
No.
This is before what we knew already. He placed his hands on the driver's head, prayed for the witches to go away. Here's what the driver said in court later on. While we were doing this, Simon talked to me about witches and curses and how they worked. After we did the search of a car and didn't find anything, like as if the witches would exist in the car, he placed his hand on my head and prayed. I don't remember the exact words of the prayer, but I do remember at the end of it, he said, "In Jesus' name, I cast the spell out of you."
Oh, no.
Guess what? The exorcism did not work. Okay, so that's what we knew. Like, religion played a role in it, but it doesn't really explain much, right? It just says, okay, well, the guy had superstitious thinking, and then they let him on the road, and also he shouldn't have been driving. But also the
Right.
boss had a religious reason for putting him back on the road, or he thought his prayers would absolve
Right.
everything, and
Yeah.
it didn't. Here's what 60 Minutes and also the newspaper The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald all did a joint investigation on this. What they figured out is more of Tudoru's religious history.
Uh-oh.
And basically what they found is, who is this dude? What does he believe? It turns out he is a longtime member, former missionary, and senior pastor for a group called the Potter's House Christian Fellowship, which is a cult-like fire and brimstone church that basically keeps congregation members inside a faith-based bubble in order to brainwash them. This is a church where television and non-Christian movies and music are banned for anyone who has an active role in the church. And if you leave the church, you're completely shunned by the remaining members in the church. Very Jehovah's Witness-ish.
Very Jehovah's
right
Witness.
there. And former members of the Potter's House who spoke to 60 Minutes say we were also shielded from accurate medical advice. Like, it is
Oh.
routine to
I
quote
wish
unquote.
I could see patterns in these things, you know?
It's routine to quote heal people by speaking in tongues and casting out demons rather than saying you should go see a doctor. Like, everything is a prayer away from getting cured.
But how does that have anything to do with the story we were talking about, Hammond? I don't see how those things connect.
So the investigation, I should say, it doesn't necessarily say that this guy, it doesn't add to the criminal case against the guy. It just
But it
shines a light
provides
on
context.
some context into what did this guy believe? Where are these beliefs coming from?
Right.
One victim's husband told a reporter, "I think there are serious threats to people's safety when people like that are making decisions that are affecting other people's lives or their livelihoods. That's dangerous." The reporters talked to the church's former leader, who walked away 15 years ago when he felt they were getting more extreme, where he said of people like Tudoru, the longer they are in the system, the more they drink the Kool-Aid. And here's what I found really interesting about this whole story. And this is unique, I think, to Australian media and not the US media. The show repeatedly referred to the bizarre beliefs of the church. Their words, not mine. They used the word bizarre.
I don't know how I feel about that. That doesn't feel very journalistic.
Loved it. They
It's like a little editorializing.
don't care. Good. They called it out for what it was.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the YouTube video they posted, the segment. Inside an American cult-like religion linked to a deadly freeway crash. They called it cult-like, like not me. Like, they were willing to say, well, this guy believes some stupid shit right here. And that's messed up. And they're not saying it should be banned or anything.
But he shouldn't
they
be
were
allowed
not
to make
giving
decisions based on...
And that's where they were going with
Sure.
it. But like they were also saying like, well, this guy believes some fucked up stuff. As they should, because it is. I need them to editorialize when it's sufficient, because these are bananas ideas. I want reporters here saying, like, not Republicans came up with a debt ceiling proposal. It's like, well, they're holding the whole country ransom for what they want.
So
That's
you're saying that there's a plainness
reporting.
of speech that the Australians have that you admire?
They're not saying this guy believes some stuff, but it's his religion. So, like, we should just acknowledge that some people have religious beliefs. No. By the way, they also pointed out, they spoke to a former member who had a booklet of, like, what the cures were for various conditions. Let me read you this.
Okay.
Bone spurs were blamed on a hatred of husbands.
Is that why Donald Trump got them?
Yes. Okay. Back pain is the fault of bitterness and rebellion.
Actually,
breast cancer.
I do have back pain, and I am both bitter and, what was the other one, rebellious?
Yes. Breast cancer, hatred of husbands, unforgiveness, and gossip. Cervical cancer.
Oh, no.
Promiscuity.
Oh, no.
Scoliosis. Twisting spirit.
Oh, I have a fucking arrow straight spine. Do not get it twisted, dudes.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, it was very...
I have a ballet dancer spine.
If we want to... I like that journalists just called out this bullshit for what it was.
Truly.
Especially because it's a famous story over there. It's like, why did this happen? It's not because the boss was religious. It's because the boss was bananas religious.
Right.
And let's call out, here's the church he went to.
Right.
Here's what they teach their members. Here's how cult-like it is. Here's how they put everybody in a bubble. And it doesn't add anything to the story other than, oh, this guy wasn't just religious. He was part of one of those religions. And let's all acknowledge that that's messed up. And they connected the dots between the faith-based ignorance of some Christians, not all. They were not ripping Christianity.
Right.
They were ripping this church and their beliefs. And they connected that with the senseless deaths that resulted from them. I would argue the public was better served because they connected the two obvious dots.
I think you're right. I have a question that is not a but question. It is a yes and then question.
Good improv skills, yes.
Thank you very much. Well, I just can hear people emailing me, and sometimes I just have to get out ahead of it. So I agree with you. You are correct. My question would be, what's the next step after this? You know what I mean?
For the case here, or in terms of the media criticism of like...
I mean, just for like us. So I'm a lawmaker in Australia,
yeah,
right? And I see this happen. And if I'm a good lawmaker, I hope, how can I prevent this tragedy from happening again? And I guess my question is, and this isn't me like doing a flippant question, I'm genuinely asking, like, how could this have been prevented?
Without knowing the details, I don't know that it could have been prevented because bad decisions lead to these bad decisions. What I'm wondering is, did like the Victorian attorneys, like, did they drop the case against the boss because he said he was just following his religion? I don't know if that's the answer. But if that was the reason,
that's not even what I was thinking
then
about.
maybe that's one way you move forward with this, to say that should not be allowed, whether this is written in the law or it becomes a social norm.
Right.
We should not allow someone's religious insanity to dictate public policy here. He should not be able to get off the hook.
No, of course.
Because of that. I don't know if that's why he got off the hook, but that's the only answer I have. Like, I don't know what else they can do about it.
So many...
Because you can't ban the religion.
Right. And so
you
unless you're like a full on like micromanager or like one of those Amazon warehouse people, like when you hire somebody to do a job, you are hiring them with the understanding of they're going to have to use their best judgment in a lot of ways, right? Like, you work with kids, I work with kids, like society has entrusted you and I to say, like, okay, you have good enough judgment. There isn't going to be like somebody watching you every moment of every day. I genuinely do not know how you could like ask appropriate and not illegal questions to probe into like somebody's decision-making skills. I guess that's it.
I don't think they would do that. I don't think they would have to do that. I think the rule is, if you make bad decisions, your religion isn't going to get you out of it.
Okay,
and I think
that's
like,
a fair...
not the same system, I know, but like in the Mississippi vaccine case we talked about, if you have a medical reason for not getting your vaccinations, that's one thing. We can work with that. but we're not going to allow religion to be your excuse for making bad decisions that could hurt other people. That's the policy I want in place. I don't know why this guy Tutoru was not charged. I hope maybe the case is ongoing. Maybe someone else will take it up. I don't know. But I did appreciate that they were like, this horrible thing happened 3 years ago. We're investigating it. And here's what we found. He's not just a religious dude who prayed.
I mean, it was
He's
great.
a member of a crazy religious belief.
Yeah.
Or he holds crazy religious beliefs.
I mean, it was
and that's the problem.
It was great investigative journalism. Like, no doubt about that. I'm just sort of stuck in the, like, okay, now what question? Which isn't the point of this,
Which
right?
we'll see.
Like, it's tragic, and I hope something like that never happens again.
I am curious if any politicians saw this and reacted to it. I didn't follow it beyond the story itself, but I'd be curious. That's all I got.
Cool. Just before we even go into bonus episode stuff, I just wanted to like quickly shout out that like trans woman who ran the marathon, and Fox News writ large fucking lost their collective mind. And my favorite thing in the entire world is the headlines.
What did they say about her?
The headlines were like basically fake woman, like whatever bullshit they used, beat 10,000 quote unquote real women at this marathon, which here are several.
And she got a medal for it.
So first of all, she placed 6,018th. Like truly 6,000 people finished in front of her. 1. 2, it's a participation trophy, gang.
She finished a marathon. She deserves a marathon and champagne.
In the middle of the pack. And I think this is an interesting thing because they are having a meltdown about this in spite of a perfectly average, non-competitive, what we talked about when you walked in. It was a fun run. It wasn't, that's not what
she was doing it to finish a marathon, not to win the marathon, which is great. Good for you.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
No, of course not. It's miserable.
Yeah. This is the case for a lot of trans athletes, which is like, especially at lower levels, high school, whatever, they just want to compete. They just want to play. Like there is right now on the right, there is this swimmer who is all up about like, I was beaten by a trans swimmer. It's like, you didn't take second in the Olympics to a trans person. You were like 6th in the collegiate championship, and like 4 other cis women beat you. You weren't that good, relatively speaking, in that crowd.
Like that
but
white
her
girl?
whole thing is like, if that one trans person wasn't there, then I would have
she got all of her
5th.
testosterone in the water or whatever. It's like that trans girl who didn't get into like University of Texas or whatever and like sued the country like, I'm smarter than some black people. How come they got it?
Oh, the white girl who didn't get in and wanted the affirmative action stuff
I literally just said the white girl who didn't get in.
No, you said the trans girl.
Did I?
Yeah.
I meant to say white girl. I'm so sorry, everybody.
But yeah, I get you.
Great.
Like,
but like,
she's like, I didn't get in because I'm white. It's like, no, it's because you weren't.
It's true. Like every affirmative action lawsuit is like, I didn't get in because black people. It's like, did you study hard?
Yeah.
Did you try doing something beyond having a rich family? Because that only gets you so far. Okay.
What are we talking about in the bonus?
We are going to talk about a tie-dyeing party I had with my students. It was very wholesome. I would like to talk to you about the Twitter blue fiasco. I'm really enjoying that.
Okay.
I did.
Hey, someone send me a Blue Sky invite. If you know what I'm talking about, send it to me. If you don't know what I'm talking about, pretend I never said it.
I saw something like that on some. I don't give a shit. I'm trying to be.
I want to talk about the John Mulaney special.
I did not watch it, but
Excellent.
I would love to talk to you about it. I indoctrinated one of my students into my anti-Reagan ways. Basically, so she's 15.
No, save it.
I just want to say that she's 15 and always talks about how she doesn't pay attention in school. So I'm constantly trying to like get her to tell me what she's learned or like teach her things. And we ended up on Reagan. Brought Dottie in. She met this horse, Scotty, and I would like to tell you about it.
Did you just say Dottie and Scotty?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Christ.
Dottie, my dog, Scotty, a horse. Mikey and I are going to Fargo in a few weeks. Do we have any listeners who live in Fargo? Question mark. And, I'm reading a book by Ann Burgess or Ann Burgess. I'm not sure which, but she is one of the original FBI profilers from, like, the Mindhunter thing.
Interesting.
And I'm really enjoying her book, and I'd like to talk about it.
You can find me at Hemant Mehta on the internet. You can go to, subscribe to my Substack. It's free, friendlyatheist.substack.com.
Gang,
you
I
can
didn't even
support this
subscribe
show.
to it, and I'm getting it. This is
Get on that.
spam.
You can support this show at patreon.com/friendlyatheistpodcast. You can email us at friendlyatheistpodcast@gmail.com.
You can always leave us a review on iTunes or like wherever the hell
People
else.
leave things.
Yeah, you
these
say things
days.
about things. This latest 5-star review is from Wednesday. It's by RB John. 5 stars. Quote, a Christian mailman.
Oh, come on. Don't leave that in the review.
On this episode about the right for the mailman to be accommodated for not working on Sundays,
no.
I painfully listened to that part twice, and I have no idea where Jessica got sidetracked on the point that was made. Union workers can dictate when they won't work, but non-union business
Get to the
know my
good
lust.
stuff.
Oh, that was it. I don't read these before
Listen,
I read
as
them
long as
to
it's
you.
5 stars.
Yeah, truly. You guys can say whatever bullshit you want to.
That's how YouTube comments work.
Love the show, but it needs a new host. Jessica had a hard time understanding the point on the last episode. I'll come back when she gets replaced.
Wow. How would you know she got replaced if you're not listening to the show?
So good. JC Milloa 79. Oh, dude, you're like 44 and you're saying mean things about girls on the internet. Calm down. Boy, that really made me happy.
time.
Sorry. I didn't realize that was about to happen.
Love it.
Well,
All right.
we'll see you next
See you
week.
next week. Bye.